Once I suffered a mortal body. Now I am Iron Incarnate. Twice slain, thrice born. Death cannot hold me.
Mordekaiser's rise to power in League of Legends is a dark and twisted tale of ambition, necromancy, and an unrelenting desire to conquer not just the living, but the dead as well. His story begins long before the current age, in a time when the world was ruled by brutal warlords, and survival was often dictated by strength and violence. Born into this savage world, Mordekaiser was no ordinary man. His rise to power was marked by a singular focus: the pursuit of dominance and immortality. In his mortal life, Mordekaiser was a feared warlord, a conqueror whose ambition was as boundless as his cruelty. He commanded vast armies and subjugated many lands under his rule, slaughtering anyone who stood in his way. His reign was not one of simple greed or desire for wealth. It was driven by a deeper hunger, a need to transcend the mortal plane and leave a legacy that would last for eternity. As he crushed his enemies and expanded his empire, Mordekaiser became increasingly obsessed with the idea of immortality. He saw death not as an end, but as a challenge, something to be conquered like any other obstacle in his path. Despite his power, however, even Mordekaiser could not escape the inevitability of death. In time, he fell in battle, just as so many warlords had before him. But death did not bring an end to Mordekaiser's ambitions. Using forbidden magic and knowledge he had acquired during his life, Mordekaiser ensured that his spirit would not pass into oblivion. Instead, he remained conscious and aware even after his body had been destroyed. His spirit lingered in the afterlife, but unlike most who are drawn into the shadowy realms of death, Mordekaiser did not wander aimlessly. He seized control of the fractured afterlife, bending the souls of the dead to his will. In the realm of death, Mordekaiser forged a new empire, a necropolis where he ruled as an undying tyrant. He enslaved the souls of the dead and created a vast kingdom, a dark reflection of the world of the living. His new dominion was a place of suffering and despair, but it was also a place of power. Mordekaiser sought to use the souls he controlled to further his ambitions in the living world. He began to plot his return to life, not as a mortal, but as an immortal overlord who would rule both the living and the dead. Centuries passed, and Mordekaiser's legend faded into myth. His name was forgotten by most of the living, but his spirit remained active in the shadowy realm of death. It was during this time that a group of sorcerers, seeking to harness the power of ancient beings, discovered the long-lost name of Mordekaiser. These sorcerers, hungry for power, sought to resurrect him, believing they could control the ancient warlord and use him as a weapon to further their own ambitions. But they underestimated the strength of Mordekaiser's will. Upon his resurrection, Mordekaiser quickly shattered the bonds the sorcerers had placed upon him. His power had only grown during his time in the afterlife, and now, with a physical form once more, he was stronger than ever before. He slaughtered the sorcerers who had dared to summon him and claimed their souls for his own. With his physical body restored, Mordekaiser wasted no time in setting his plans into motion. He began to rebuild his empire, this time with the knowledge and power of both life and death at his command. The first step in Mordekaiser's new reign of terror was the construction of the Immortal Bastion, a massive fortress built from dark magic and the souls of the dead. This fortress became the center of his empire, a place where his power was absolute. From the Immortal Bastion, Mordekaiser raised an army unlike any the world had ever seen. His soldiers were not living men, but the souls of the dead, bound to his will and driven by his dark magic. With each victory, Mordekaiser's army grew larger, as the souls of the slain were added to his ranks. Mordekaiser's new reign was marked by terror and domination. Entire kingdoms fell before his army of the dead, and those who tried to resist were crushed. His goal was not simply to conquer the world of the living, but to create a bridge between life and death, a single, unified kingdom where he would rule eternally. In this new order, death would hold no power over him, and the living and the dead alike would be subject to his will. But despite his overwhelming power, Mordekaiser's reign was eventually challenged. a coalition of powerful forces, mages, warriors, and entire kingdoms, recognized the threat he posed to all of Runeterra and joined together to bring him down. Realizing that they could not defeat him alone, they united in a desperate attempt to destroy the Dark Warlord once and for all. In a final, cataclysmic battle, the coalition faced Mordekaiser and his army of the dead. Though the battle was fierce and many lives were lost, the coalition ultimately succeeded in destroying Mordekaiser's physical form. His empire crumbled, and the immortal bastion was left in ruins. Yet, even in defeat, Mordekaiser was not truly vanquished. He had prepared for such a moment. His soul, bound to his necropolis in the realm of the dead, simply returned to the afterlife. From his seat of power in the shadowy realm of death, Mordekaiser continued to plot his next move. His defeat in the living world was only a temporary setback. He gathered his strength, waiting for the right moment to return and resume his conquest of both life and death. Today, Mordekaiser remains a looming, ever-present threat. In the shadows of his necropolis, he schemes, biding his time and amassing power. His ultimate goal is clear: to break the barrier between the realms of life and death entirely, creating a single, unified kingdom where he would rule as an immortal god. In his mind, the living are merely future subjects, waiting to join his eternal army. When he finally returns, the world will once again tremble before him, as both the living and the dead fall under his unyielding dominion. Mordekaiser's journey is one of relentless ambition, where neither death nor defeat can halt his rise. Through sheer force of will, mastery over necromancy, and a vision of eternal dominance, he has cemented his place as a terrifying force in Runeterra. He is not a man bound by the rules of the living. He transcends them, reshaping the very fabric of reality itself in his quest for power. As he waits in the dark, growing ever stronger, the world remains unaware of the storm that will come when Mordekaiser returns to finish what he started. Though he has been defeated before, Mordekaiser's power has only increased over time. His knowledge of necromancy and the arcane arts has deepened, and he now understands the inner workings of life and death in ways that few can comprehend. He seeks to create a new order, a world where the boundaries between the living and the dead are obliterated, and where he alone holds dominion over all. To achieve this, Mordekaiser plans to tear down the veil between the realms, allowing the dead to walk freely among the living. When that day comes, the living will have little choice but to either submit to his rule or be destroyed. Those who resist will face not only Mordekaiser's army of the dead, but also the reality that their own deaths will only strengthen his forces. Every fallen warrior, every slain mage, will rise again in his service, bound to him for eternity. Entire kingdoms will fall, and the dead will outnumber the living. This is the future Mordekaiser envisions, a world where death is no longer a boundary, but a weapon, and where he is the master of all. But while Mordekaiser's plans are vast, there are still those who stand against him. Champions of the living world, heroes who have fought against the darkness before, continue to prepare for the day when Mordekaiser will return. They know that his defeat is not the end, and they seek to learn more about the ancient magics that bind him. Among them are mages, warriors, and even some who have delved into the forbidden arts of necromancy themselves, hoping to find a way to counter Mordekaiser's power. The struggle between Mordekaiser and these champions is not just a battle of physical strength, but of knowledge and magic. Mordekaiser's mastery of death is unparalleled, but there are forces in the world that even he has not fully comprehended. Ancient beings, older than Mordekaiser himself, watch from the shadows, knowing that the balance between life and death is fragile. Some of these entities may have the power to stand against him, but they remain hidden, waiting for the right moment to intervene. In the end, Mordekaiser's future is uncertain. Though his power grows with each passing day, the forces that oppose him are not without hope. The battle for Runeterra, for the balance between life and death, is far from over. But one thing is certain: when Mordekaiser returns, it will not be as a mere conqueror. He will return as a god of both life and death, determined to reshape the world in his image, and the living will tremble before his unrelenting might.